This is Friday Java on the 11th of April 2014. I'm here with Jerry Pippin, the special co-host for this particular version. We'll get right into it here with Edward Edwards. Edward Edwards was the governor of Louisiana. He went to prison. He's now reappeared. He's 86 years old. His wife divorced him, I believe, while he was in prison, and now he has a different wife, and they have a little child. He's shown here on Politico pushing the little baby. And he's running for the House of Representatives. Only Edward Edwards could do something like this. He's a raising Cajun. He was a governor of Louisiana, and they entrapped him, basically, in my opinion. He went to jail, served his time. Now he's back again, and he's 4 years out of being 90 years old. And he's
so I didn't realize Boston Red, that you could have a felony conviction and still be in Congress.
Well, that's in the state of Louisiana. I have no idea about that. It's very difficult to say in Louisiana.
Maybe it's up to different states. Maybe it's not a federal law.
Well, he was possibly so.
Maybe he got pardoned, as far as I know. I don't know.
Well, that's probably. Let's see. Well, it says. Let's see. At the age of 75 on corruption charges, 29.
Now, you've seen pictures of his baby. It looks like him, huh?
His baby looks just like him. It's 29. Excuse me. Let me get this right here. It's 49 years after he was first elected to Congress. I didn't know he served in Congress before he was a governor. In 1965, and his friend LBJ, another connection to LBJ, and called him and congratulated him, and the phone numbers from, and I think you remember this guy probably, Harold Barefoot Sanders. He was LBJ's chief legislative aide, and so moved that he stood up at his desk to take the call, and that is Edwards. So later he ran for governor in Louisiana. I believe, in fact, he ran twice for governor in Louisiana. But nonetheless, he did go away for a while for political corruption, not unusual in Louisiana. He's not the first one to do that. The former mayor of New Orleans, Jerry, an African-American, Ray Nagin, he's getting ready to go away. And William Dollar Bill Jefferson, he's in the big house right now. He used to be a congressman out in New Orleans. I mean, there's a long list of characters from Louisiana that have ended up in the big house.
Shall we say, Boston Red, that they have a proud heritage?
They indeed do, and there's another fellow here that he's called a kissing representative. I guess we throw him in here right away. His name is McAllister, I guess is how you'd pronounce his thing. He kissed his aide, and the Republicans from Bobby Gentle, the governor, who's incidentally, his rating's not very good at all in Louisiana, to John Boehner saying he should resign after being caught on video of kissing his aide. Oh, well. In Louisiana, that's nothing. Vitters, who is the senator from Louisiana, he was caught literally in the whorehouse, and he's since repudiated himself, I guess went back to church, and he's still literally carrying on. So in Louisiana, I guess you'd say anything goes. So we go from there to Catherine Sabinas. She used to be the governor candidate of Kansas. She was also the daughter of a governor of Ohio. She resigned today. I guess some people pushed her on out the door. Or maybe she left. She's 65 years old. After, let's see, what is it? 7.5 million people enrolled in Obamacare. Now, that's not including, Jerry, the people that can still now enroll in Medicaid, providing their state has anything for them to roll on. They'll continue to enroll. So it'll be way over 8 million people before it's all over. So in other words,
I think so too. And Catherine Sebelius, did happen under her watch, but I don't think she was the only one fooled about the company that was doing this. Companies, I guess I should say, as you know, and I think you agree with me. There's ample evidence, at least albeit circumstantial, that there's something rotten in Denmark. In other words, there was some hanky-panky with Obamacare. Can you believe the Republicans would do something like that?
Well, no doubt they did something like that, but part of the problem was the government's procurement process in the first place. That has bit people literally all the way from Maryland, and their thing their side has to be redone, out to Oregon, to Minnesota, and various other places. And in fact, in Oregon, it was so bad. Oracle evidently was a cheap corporate there. They withheld some of the money from those characters. They had to hire someone else to rebuild the site. But what Oregon did was, instead of relying on the site, they just went to literally paper and enrolled the people and finished it up. But in state after state, the federal government, the problem was the people that, quote-unquote, were certified or had the inside track on this. And these are the same characters that have been doing state and government work forever and have been doing it wrong. And not only that, you're right, it was sabotage, but there's not been an investigation on yet. In Minnesota, they're talking about having a full investigation of it. But in the House and those places, they talked about what Catherine Sebelius did. They called up some of the contractors, but they did not talk about the whole bidding process. And no one has talked about it, as far as I know, the Republicans, or anyone basically, about this whole bidding process and why these clowns ended up with it in the first place. They had about 10 of them on the rolls. That those were the only ones qualified. So if you had a company that was fully qualified, could do the job, you could hire additional staff, it was a no-go. You could have not been the principal contractor there, and you would probably, no doubt, not even been a subcontractor because it was all tied up. So that's what killed them, and the media had not reported that. And I'm looking at the Washington Post right now, Jerry. Basically, that is where it stood. So she rides out on a very, very positive note, and I noticed these characters have tried to disparage her as much as possible. But she's been there, let's see, 1,808 days as of Thursday. So she's one of the longest actually serving cabinet members around. And she continues on. And someplace I read, and this is not the Washington Post, they have a nominee more or less, and they'll be from budget. And let me just get that name for you there, Jerry. We want to be a little bit more precise about what we do around this place. This is an
well, yeah, you know, I think we ought to watch what happens now that she's leaving the administration. She doesn't seem to be from the heritage, the genes in her family, one of those that'll just get kicked out with a whimper. I think we haven't heard the last of what actually happened.
It's possible.
Rolling out Obamacare.
Now, the woman taking this place over, the president doesn't want to avoid a fight with them because so he's getting Sylvia Matthews Birdwell. She's director of the Office of Management and Budget, which is the most important office actually in the federal government, and she was confirmed unanimously by the Senate. So in other words, it should not be a fight there with Miss Birdwell as far as her being able to move forward, with this position.
Well, here again, it's going to be interesting to see how this fight on getting her this job to replace, and put new blood in that department, which oversees Obamacare. The Republicans definitely just vowed out and out. They've been very blatant about it. They're going to kill it one way or the other.
Well, they're going to have more of a problem here because the management budget, as you know, runs everything in government, literally. They are the ones that money is appropriated, but they're the ones that decide which direction the dollars go. And they appointed her to that position, which means, she's one of these, I don't know if she came Wall Street or where she came from, but nonetheless, she's not a controversial person. She's not going to wave anything, as many administrators don't. But the thing with Catherine Sebelius was a little bit different. First of all, she was a very popular governor of Kansas, and her father was a governor of Ohio. So she came from a very political family, and she had a lot of political substance there. And when she was appointed, the point person, but this is just cosmetics. Haven't seen any polls because they haven't conducted any on what the American people thought of her. My take is, Jerry, that most of the American people liked Catherine Sabrinas and what they saw. Now, a lot of this from the media was, well, okay, the site collapsed. Well, I agree with you. It was the code was written in such a way that it collapsed. There's more proof of that coming out, that many of these people had decided that it was going to collapse because they didn't do what we call the testing on it. And the reason it was not done was it was meant to collapse. On any project we do these days, and done in probably the last 10 years, we do, and this would be what they call agile programming, we do constantly do testing. And there, in some of these outfits, they didn't do any testing until a few weeks or days before the actual opening of the website. So in other words, that was a disaster. You don't even open a little measly $1 million project like that. So you know something was up. It was meant to go that way. But there's been no, you're right, there's been no investigation on it. Will there be an investigation on it? Well, in some states, the auditors are investigating.
Now that she's left, and they were trying to hang all the responsibility on her.
Yeah.
I mean, the Republicans, remember, they wanted her hide right away.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, Roberts in Kansas said, well, she left because it was a miserable rollout. Well, I don't know. That cuts two different ways. You know, her leaving now, she had wanted to leave, or they wanted her to leave. But it honestly doesn't matter. What's going to be remembered about this site is 7.5 million people signed up for the thing. The site is now working. And in November, we'll start anew with the sign-ups, and there'll be many more people that didn't, for one reason or the other, didn't get in on the first part of it, or they want to get rid of what they had and get in on it. And as far as the Medicaid, you can sign up now. And there are other people that tried to sign up that are going to be given a grace period. So in other words, it moves on. Anyway, we'll leave this side, Jerry, and go to Rush Limbaugh, Stephen Colbert, or Colbert, however you want to pronounce his name. It used to be Colbert, evidently, is what the tale comes out of the Carolinas. But when he got some money, he insisted the family call themselves Colbert. It's sort of like Tony Dorsett said that his family never pronounced their name. What did they pronounce their name? Anyway, they give it the French pronunciation. I forget now. It's been a while since he played football. But they tend to change the name. Anyway, we'll call him Colbert. And Mr. Colbert has a 5-year contract. Mr. Limbaugh, who you told me in our green room wanted the job, is disparaging, and he's saying the networks are deliberately putting a comedian there that is a liberal, and he'll probably be doing liberal jokes. I kind of wonder about that one. What's your take, Jerry? You've been a comedian. I don't know comedy. What's your take?
Well, I think Colbert is very talented. He's a little beyond the mainstream in many ways, perfect for cable late night. It'll be interesting to see if he can transfer that a very creative mind and a very creative guy in presentation. He's hilarious while making social points. And if Limbaugh doesn't like him, it's because that's Limbaugh's territory, you know, trying to make points while using humor. And his humor was cutting-edge and that it was unmerciful. What he did to Teddy Kennedy, I don't think that I'd do that to Hitler. And so the point is, from my standpoint, is that Rush Limbaugh just sounds like and who would expect to endorse Stephen Colbert? And as far as how to pronounce his name, I think he did that as a takeoff. I don't know about the money, could have, but he everything he does is put on. He makes a lot of points and a lot of funny things that have a message and ring true. And David Letterman was like that to a certain extent before he got the contract with CBS. And Letterman toned some stuff down to appeal to a larger audience. But at the same time, he still endorses Clinton and still endorses democratic politics as a whole, including President Obama.
Well, another interesting thing about him, I guess he comes from the same well, he does have a theater and improv comedy background, but also he's also a singer and a dancer. Sort of like, remember the fellow that used to be I can't get his name right now, used to be on PBS that played the piano? What was his name? He was a comedian. Anyway, nonetheless, and also another thing about, I don't know very much about this fellow at all. I haven't heard him.
Oh, you're talking about the guy that does the song parodies with the piano.
Right. Yeah.
In fact, he's kind of dropped out of sight.
I hadn't heard from him in a while. He did that, and he did his comedy. Anyway, nonetheless,
he was quite successful with it.
He was very successful,
and he was actually very liberal, and he's knocking Republican political things because it's pretty easy to do. And Colbert, does similar things, only even more modern than that. Colbert is right there on the younger generation, and he goes on up to the middle generations. And somehow I think that CBS believes, and it's not a surprise. It's always been rumored that he would, replace David Letterman. Colbert has been making cable history for a long, long time. And one of the things about Colbert is today, to give you an example of his humor, he said, CBS has asked me to kind of get more into the Letterman, and I'm paraphrasing here, Letterman style, so I call a guest, and we're going to put a gap in my front teeth here.
Okay.
See, Letterman has a gap in his front teeth in case you never noticed.
Right, yeah. The interesting thing.
So see, I mean, that's an example of humor. It's mean, especially if you're the target. But so no wonder Rush Limbaugh wouldn't like him. But
I guess you'll have to tell
Rush Limbaugh does the same sort of thing, only with a different ideology and a different slant.
He does, and
I mean, he's unmerciful.
Well, the interesting thing about Colbert, and Colbert is probably French. One thing about him is he's a married father, it says here, and a devoted Catholic. I didn't know that. There are not all that many Catholics in. I think he's from South Carolina.
So, he on his shows, he no sacred spots that you don't touch, and religion, he goes after that as much as he does anything else.
Okay. And some of the numbers here, it says Phelan enjoys a nightly average from Nielsen of 5 million viewers. Letterman averaged 2.77 million over the same 7-week period there. And let's see, Jimmy Kimmel, who I didn't even know was still in the business, averages about 2.65 million there. And the Colbert Report averages about 1.35 million, but I think it's shown on the Comedy Channel. Is that where he is? I don't even know where he is. Tells my ignorance.
Yeah, it's one of those cable channels, a specialty channel, and you can't really judge mainstream ratings with cable ratings, not even today.
Right.
You and I've talked before. We've done some shows that over time, on demand, have reached cable proportions.
Right. You tell me about that.
Because there's so many.
Right.
You're just diluted as far as audience quality. I mean, you got 30 different shows. Well, that if you got an equal amount, that'd be 3 points.
Okay. Right. There's no doubt
about that.
And that
means nobody watching television. Everybody's sleeping. Everybody's watching television. So the point is that, in my opinion, that CBS had him lined up already. The only suspicious thing I think is you needn't stop to think about it. Last week, David Letterman announced his retirement, and this week, is announced as the person who replaces him. That took NBC and Jay Leno for a job after Johnny Carson.
Well, Johnny Carson was very, very hard to replace. As we move down here on our time, we'll cover the last segment here. President Carter today in Austin, Texas, delivered a tribute to LBJ. I had not heard it yet, but it will be played in the edited version after we leave here. Give me your take on that, Jerry. You heard it.
I heard it. I thought it was inspiring. In fact, I asked Jane Swardley, our producer, to save it, the audio of it, because I'm going to use it sometime when we do a show on LBJ. If nothing else, I have several people want to get up and, slash LBJ and say he's a murderer and knocked off Kennedy and a few other things like that.
Whatever.
And I think the best thing to do would be to play, for balance in the show, some of the comments from Mr. Obama, who I thought today did a masterful speech, one of the best tributes I've ever heard. And it was something that LBJ would have been proud to hear. And he didn't at the same time gloss over the faults of LBJ at all. But he pointed out how LBJ thought and how much the teaching time that he had at a Mexican school in the poorest county in Texas,
right,
played upon his sensibilities in his own life. His own life. He had an outdoor toilet growing up.
That's right.
Didn't have electricity.
That's right.
It was a miracle he even got to teach school, that he was able to get a teacher's degree, but he didn't. And so he was able to get the war on poverty settled, at least politically. Now, of course, you can't settle it. We still got problems today. But Obama, in this speech, addresses that. And he addresses it and ties it together, I thought, in a very profound way that could do nothing but help Obama and the Democrats in this off-year election, if people pay attention to that speech.
Well, you're correct about that, Jerry. And one of the things about President Johnson, I've always felt that I had an opportunity to talk with President Johnson very briefly at his library. And at that time, that was one of the last appearances he made. He was talking about the Civil Rights Act, and that was when he was literally popping his angel nitrate. That was what they had for heart problems at that time. Had he been in the world of stent therapy, he probably would have still been alive. But he was very proud of that. And what most people don't understand there, when he was teaching, the Mexican students, and some of them Mexican Americans, some of them weren't, that Johnson actually knew Spanish. Most people never thought about that. He did. And not only that, Johnson came from a Scandinavian background, a little bit different from some people. Most people never talk about that, but he did. And Lyndon Johnson was a different kind of fellow. Yes, he was brass, but you need a brass person. He would have been the kind of person, had he been around today, and of course, obviously with the social media, been different, but I would have predicted he would have done very well, because against people like Rush Limbaugh, he would have told Rush Limbaugh, as Johnson used to say, how the cow ate the proverbial cabbage or whatever the cows eat, and Limbaugh would have fell into his place. Johnson,
President Obama addressed the quirk in Lyndon Johnson's personality, and he counted it up as a blessing, because a positive, because the way he had Dixon involved for the poverty programs and the other Johnson agenda, the civil rights programs especially, is he said, and Dixon bought it, hook, line, and sinker, and that was that someday it would be Abraham Lincoln and Dixon's name, side by side, equal. And somebody asked Johnson later why he did that with Dixon, and he said, well, I appeal to his ego as a senator. All senators believe that they're equal to the top and the best, and Dirksen is certainly one of those people. And
Well,
we
that's
need
right.
to stay below.
Dirksen did understand,
And for the
history.
people of America.
Right. They had a sense of history, and I think probably that's one of the things that's happened now, that many of these characters that are running around the Senate now and the House really don't have a sense of history, and they will be rewarded by being written out of history, not because somebody deliberately written them out, because they didn't do anything to get into history. I mean, it's going to be pretty crude on some of these characters. Boehner is probably going to be written in as the man that gets to a few happy hours, and that's basically about it. I mean, there's just not very much they have done to push the nation forward. They've only helped the nation backward, and I think this comes out. LBJ, and it's kind of unfortunate, but the thing that LBJ faced was, first he was from Texas, and he faced a lot of prejudice like that. He was an ordinary man. He was not a rich man. He may have been rich after he got in the presidency and retired, but not before that. He was not. And that extreme prejudice against him, and what he was compared to, well, he was compared to Abe Lincoln. Of course, Abe Lincoln was long dead, and he was compared to the late, President Kennedy, who never finished out his first term, who was a man that really would not have been able to pass very much legislation because of the situation he was in. So that was it. So they set it up deliberately like that and kept.
Well, and Obama pointed out that Kennedy decided upon Johnson as his vice presidential running mate because of one thing. He was a Democrat that could appeal to the South.
That's
and
right.
he mentioned Johnson as saying, well, we just lost the South for the Democrats for at least a decade.
Well,
once they passed
he didn't
those
know
things.
more than that. But, Johnson was not a man that really cared about what the Southerners in the South thought. He was a man about moving on with his program. He basically told them that. Said, we're going to get this done, and that's it. And he got it done. He got it passed. He got it signed. And that was the end of the story as far as Johnson was concerned. Now, Vietnam was one of those strange situations. Our American foreign policy, they weighted Johnson down, and you remember more of this than I do, but a majority of American people were in favor of it, and they didn't know where in the hell Vietnam was. And then when they finally started to finish it out, the media moved in the other direction, left Johnson out there and cut the limb off from under him, and that was basically about it, and ran him out, basically out of office. But you remember what they offered up as attorneys. McCarthy, a right-wing crazy before he died. He's dead now, fortunately. And then, of course, they had, the young Robert Kennedy. We don't know where he would have went. We know one thing. He liked to use wiretaps, and had he been in the age of drones, he would have been hell on the people. So that was kind of the alternative to Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson was a very practical man. He was a man, as far as I'm concerned, at least with the African people, he saved the African people from staying in slavery another 100 years.
Okay, go ahead.
I said he saved the the African people from being in slavery another 100 years. Jimmy Carter talked about that while he was watching Hank Aaron. But, had not been for Lyndon Johnson, I don't know if Hank Aaron would have been able to get into the stadium down there in Georgia. So, there's a whole bunch of things going on here. And I think there's a subliminal thing with some of the elite people in this country that no doubt they blame Johnson for the Civil Rights Act because they didn't want it. And that's what the legacy is. And I'm glad that President Obama did Lyndon Johnson justice. And remember, Lyndon Johnson also wanted to have a national health care program. He never got off the ground. The next president to take it up was Richard Nixon, and Nixon almost got it before he had to leave, and President Obama took care of it. So there's a whole thing here. We have to kind of understand, where we are, especially with LBJ, and people now. Some of the right wingers are still trying to write LBJ out of the history, coming up with all sorts of schemes. What LBJ said about this and what LBJ said about that. it doesn't really matter, Jerry, what LBJ said on the phone about Dr. King. The whole point is, like LBJ told King, you keep on protesting, I'll keep on legislating. LBJ was not a fool.
That's true.
That's to be remembered. And lately also, and we're going to close out here, but with Al Sharpton, they come up with a situation back in the late 80s where Al Sharpton supposedly cooperated with the FBI. They call him a snitch, and the Daily News said he was a rat. Al Sharpton said, no, I was a cat. They threatened my life. And of course, you know this yourself. In the music industry with payola and various other schemes were going on with the promotion, it was mobbed up. Boxing definitely was mobbed up. And those were two of the areas Al Sharpton was around, and the whole thing revolved around a tour of Michael Jackson and another artist. The problem was the tour would have went on, but there were no African American promoters. So Al Sharpton had his grassroots thing to get the African Americans into the promotion. And that's where the trouble started. But again, that was back in the late 80s. So now President Obama will speak tomorrow at the convention, National Action Network convention. And they brought this up in something called a smoking gun to say, well, Al Sharpton was an informant against the mob. Well, he's the first man I've ever heard of that supposedly informed amongst the mob was not made a national hero. But they're trying to get that on Obama, to reflect on him. And evidently it didn't wash. And then with Mayor de Blasio said, well, just take his side of this. That was, 31 years ago? So we go with that. So that was kind of the end of that story right there. Anyway, Jerry, let you have the literally the final words here because run out of time. We got to get a little bit of President Obama in this deal.
Well, it's been a very active week politically, and we are seeing, I think, a swing back to sensibilities in Washington, at least, in some of the states, not all of them. And, it's just one of those things that over the long haul, truth will out. That what is fair is fair. And people will wake up to that and understand things. The conservative right has been masterful at, frankly, lying with a straight face. And that's the way it is in the 21st century, unfortunately, so far.
Very good, Jerry. Good night to you, and we'll talk again probably for the Monday morning quarterback coming up here. Apologize for some of the technical difficulties along the line. We will go now to President Obama. Good night, Jerry.
Yeah, and I apologize for all the noise, but we've had a very active night here at the medical center, and lots of things going on in the background. So,
not so much background noise there. The signal's coming out of New York.
So anyway, things are going on well with me, and good night, Boston Bread. Enjoyed it.
Good night to you. Good night.
Please have a seat. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please. What a singular honor it is for me to be here today. I want to thank, first and foremost, the Johnson family for giving us this opportunity and the graciousness with which Michelle and I have been received. We came down a little bit late because we were upstairs looking at some of the exhibits and some of the private offices that were used by President Johnson and Ms. Johnson. And Michelle was in particular interested of a recording in which Lady Bird is critiquing President Johnson's performance. And she said, come, you need to listen to this. And she pressed the button and nodded her head. Some things do not change, even 50 years later. To all the members of Congress, the warriors for justice, the elected officials, and community leaders who are here today, I want to thank you. 4 days into his sudden presidency, and the night before he would address a joint session of the Congress in which he once served, Lyndon Johnson sat around a table with his closest advisors, preparing his remarks to a shattered and grieving nation. He wanted to call on senators and representatives to pass a civil rights bill, the most sweeping since Reconstruction. And most of his staff counseled him against it. They said it was hopeless, that it would anger powerful Southern Democrats and committee chairmen, that it risked derailing the rest of his domestic agenda. And one particularly bold aide said he did not believe a president should spend his time and power on lost causes, however worthy they might be. To which it is said, President Johnson replied, "Well, what the hell's the presidency for?" What the hell's the presidency for? If not to fight for causes you believe in. Today, as we commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act, we honor the men and women who made it possible. Some of them are here today. We celebrate giants like John Lewis and Andrew Young and Julian Bond. We recall the countless unheralded Americans, black and white, students and scholars, preachers and housekeepers, whose names are etched not on monuments, but in the hearts of their loved ones and in the fabric of the country that they helped to change. But we also gather here, deep in the heart of the state that shaped him, to recall one giant man's remarkable efforts to make real the promise of our founding. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Those of us who've had the singular privilege to hold the office of the presidency know well that progress in this country can be hard and it can be slow, frustrating, and sometimes you're stymied. The office humbles you. You're reminded daily that in this great democracy, you are but a relay swimmer in the currents of history, bound by decisions made by those who came before, reliant on the efforts of those who will follow to fully vindicate your vision. But the presidency also affords a unique opportunity to bend those currents by shaping our laws and by shaping our debates, by working within the confines of the world as it is, but also by reimagining the world as it should be. This was President Johnson's genius. As a master of politics and the legislative process, he grasped, like few others, the power of government to bring about change. LBJ was nothing if not a realist. He was well aware that the law alone isn't enough to change hearts and minds. A full century after Lincoln's time, he said, until justice is blind to color, until education is unaware of race, until opportunity is unconcerned with the color of men's skins, emancipation will be a proclamation, but not a fact. He understood laws couldn't accomplish everything, but he also knew that Only the law could anchor change and set hearts and minds on a different course. And a lot of Americans needed the law's most basic protections at that time. As Dr. King said at the time, it may be true that the law can't make a man love me, but it can keep him from lynching me. And I think that's pretty important. And passing laws was what LBJ knew how to do. No one knew politics, and no one loved legislating more than President Johnson. He was charming when he needed to be, ruthless when required. He could wear you down with logic and argument. He could horse trade. And he could flatter.